Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on, well, a profoundly difficult subject. It's a case that didn't just shake South Carolina, it sent ripples across the whole country.
Absolutely. It's a story of almost unimaginable tragedy.
It is, but it's also more than that. It's a stark look at how systems can fail, and how those failures, well, they seem to pave the way for the absolute unthinkable. We're going to unpack the horrifying story of Timothy Jones Jr., and really, the core question, the one that's just so hard to grapple with, is how? How does a father, who should be the ultimate protector, become the executioner of his own 5 young children?
It's a question that chills you to the bone.
It really does. So our mission today is to go through the sources we have, piece together the timeline, really dig into this man's background, which is complex and deeply troubled, and look hard at the warning signs, the signs that were missed.
Tragically missed.
Yeah, it's a tough one, no doubt. But understanding the layers here, I think it's crucial. So, okay, let's start this deep dive.
And I think it's important to acknowledge right up front how sensitive this is. But dissecting the details, even the most disturbing ones, is, well, it's necessary if we want to understand.
Absolutely.
What's really striking here, I find, isn't just the horror, though that's immense. It's the complex tapestry, the events, the choices, the personality traits, how it all sort of converged.
Right. It wasn't just one thing.
No. So we'll look at what happened right around that awful day, but then we need to step back. Look at the history of Timothy Jones Jr. himself. We'll explore how the family broke down, bit by bit, and maybe most importantly, those missed opportunities for anyone to step in.
Those missed chances are just heartbreaking. So to really get a handle on that unraveling, we have to start on what should have been just a normal day, Thursday, August 28th, 2014. It's a day that starts like any other for lots of families, right? The routine. Timothy Jones Jr. is supposed to pick up his 5 kids, Mia, Elias, Nathan, Gabriel, and Abigail from their elementary school, Sax's Gotha, and a daycare nearby. This is in Lexington County, South Carolina.
A daily ritual.
Yeah.
Something that should be completely safe. Mundane, even.
Exactly. Comforting, almost, in its predictability. But, as the sources make pretty clear, normalcy was already kind of a fragile thing for these kids.
That day, any sense of normal just completely shattered. Instead of going straight home to their trailer, which was already pretty isolated, down a dirt road.
Right.
The car, with him driving, makes this sharp detour. Unexpected. Pulls right into a Walmart parking lot.
Why? What happened there?
Well, that's just it.
Yeah.
What we know comes from, fragments of security footage and Jones's own later statements, which were pretty vague.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just odd. It was deeply disturbing.
How so?
He makes the kids get out of the car, forces them out, apparently.
Yeah.
Right there in public, pushes them out. Then, just as suddenly, he loads them all back in.
For no reason.
No clear reason, no. It's just this bizarre, aggressive act. It makes no sense, just this really unsettling glimpse into the chaos that was obviously building up inside him.
Wow. That image, kids being forced out, then back in a Walmart parking lot. It speaks volumes, doesn't it? About his state of mind.
It really does. A total loss of rational control, it seems.
And later that same evening, around 7:12 p.m., Amber, the mom, his estranged wife, she calls the house.
Okay.
One of the boys, Nathan, picks up his voice, just a little kid's voice. They have a quick chat. Seems totally normal.
But she had no idea.
No idea at all. That was the last time she'd ever hear his voice, the last time anyone would really hear from any of them directly. After that call, just silence.
Complete silence.
No more calls answered, no messages returned. Sometime between that brief, innocent phone call and midnight, in that quiet trailer, 5 kids just vanished.
If you connect that to, patterns of domestic danger,
Yeah.
that weird detour, the Walmart incident, the sudden total silence,
Yeah.
these are the first terrifying pieces of the puzzle, aren't they?
Absolutely. Chilling red flags, but only really clear in hindsight, tragically.
And the silence just stretches on. Days pass. By September 1st, he's seen, totally casually, at a Dunkin' Donuts in Spartanburg.
With the children.
With the children's bodies in the car, driving around like nothing happened, like these kids he was supposed to protect weren't dead in the back.
Oh, my God.
Then, September 3rd, he's walking the aisles of a Walmart in West Columbia, buying saws. Big plastic bins, muriatic acid.
Oh, no.
The receipts. They later became these silent, damning pieces of evidence, telling this awful story of, trying to cover it all up.
Just the thought of him doing that, buying those things, while his children are
Yeah.
It's sickening. Meanwhile, the kids are being marked absent from school Friday, Monday, Tuesday.
No one sees them after that Thursday. He
Right.
just keeps driving, keeps up this horrifying facade.
And that same day, September 3rd, Amber finally calls the authorities.
Her mother's intuition screaming, no doubt.
Absolutely. The kids missed a scheduled visit. She couldn't reach them. She knew something was wrong.
But nothing happened right away.
Not immediately, no. Despite her pleas. It wasn't until September 9th, almost 2 weeks after they disappeared, that the world finally found out they were missing.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And by then, it was just far, far too late. The bodies had already been found, horrifically decomposed. It took DNA to even confirm who they were. That delay, it just allowed this whole nightmare to unfold.
That gap in time is just agonizing, isn't it? It really makes you question the system, the community. How does that window just close?
It does. And to try and understand how he could do this, we have to go back, back to his beginning.
Exactly. Timothy Jones Jr., born 1981. He was the only child of Timothy Jones Sr. and Cindy Jones.
And his mother, Cindy, she was only 16 when she had him. Just a kid herself.
Yeah, and from the accounts we have, what followed was just this relentless storm of dysfunction, things that seemed like they must have laid some kind of troubled groundwork.
What kind of dysfunction are we talking about?
Well, Timothy Sr. later testified about Cindy, described her as violent, unstable, screaming, lashing out, really disturbing behaviors.
Like
things like cutting up clothes with knives, and almost unbelievably feeding baby Timothy laxatives.
laxatives to an infant.
Yes. While she was never formally diagnosed, people around her felt strongly she had a serious mental illness, just this constant turbulence in his earliest years.
And that idea of early life experiences, severe dysfunction, abandonment, how that can shape later behavior. It's crucial here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because then, when he was just 18 months old, she was gone, vanished from his life completely.
18 months, that's devastating for a child.
It's a profound wound, isn't it? That kind of abandonment so early, it followed him. His father remarried, tried to build a stable life, but it seems Timothy Jr. was already sort of heading down a different path.
A more destructive path.
It appears so. By 2001, he's 20 years old, arrested in Illinois. It wasn't just one thing: cocaine possession, check forgery, car theft.
Wow, quite a list.
Yeah, not just, teenage mistakes, more like cries for help, maybe.
Yeah.
Signs of a deeper struggle, trying to find control, maybe, in destructive ways.
And he did time for that.
Sentenced to 7 years, but only served 2. So an early, stark introduction to the wrong side of the law.
It really forces you to ask, how do those early experiences, the abandonment, the chaos, the instability, how do they shape how you cope, how you see the world?
Exactly. It doesn't excuse anything, of course not.
Yeah.
But it provides this chilling context for his later actions, his desperate need for control.
It really does.
And then, surprisingly perhaps, things seem to shift. A new chapter starts. He meets Amber Kaiser in Chicago.
How old were they?
She was 18, from Pennsylvania. He was 22. On the surface, maybe it looked like a chance for a fresh start, right? To build something different.
Something stable.
Yeah. They got married in 2004. And then came the 5 children: Mia, Elias, Nathan, Gabriel, and Abigail. Sources describe them as just, bright-eyed kids, full of potential.
Innocent lives.
Completely. The family moved around a bit: Pennsylvania, Mississippi, eventually South Carolina.
And outwardly, he was building this picture of stability, wasn't he? He got a degree.
He did. Computer engineering from Mississippi State in 2011. A real achievement. Then landed a good job at Intel in Columbia, making, $71,000 a year.
So stability, success, a full house, that's the image.
That's the image. But as we know, that outward picture, it often hides a very different reality. That contrast between the appearance, good job, family, and the internal reality. The control, the disturbing beliefs. That's such a chillingly common theme in these cases, isn't it?
It really is. So despite the salary, they weren't living in some nice suburban house.
No, it was this cramped, isolated trailer in Lexington County, maybe kind of mirroring the psychological confinement happening inside. Amber stayed home with kids, and slowly those cracks in his facade started showing.
What did Amber say?
She later testified about his beliefs, how they became increasingly rigid, controlling, driven by this really staunch, almost fundamentalist religious view.
In what way?
Views like women were to be seen and not heard, children should be quiet, obedient, practically invisible, just under his complete control.
That's terrifying.
And it gets worse. Amber claimed he actually talked about wanting a farm full of children, not out of love or wanting a big family.
Oh, why?
To rule over them.
Yeah.
Her words, to have this domain where his control was absolute.
Wow. Just, wow.
And this wasn't just talk. Police later found his religious materials, passages highlighted, emphasizing corporal punishment, total obedience, domination.
So this ideology was real, and it was guiding his actions within the home.
It seems so. It really shows that insidious nature of control, especially when it's wrapped up in these rigid beliefs. Outside, maybe they look like a normal conservative family. Dad works, mom's home.
But inside...
Inside that trailer, yeah, darkness was festering. Timothy Jones Jr. was just quietly spiraling.
It reminds you that monsters aren't just born, are they? They're made, bit by bit, experience by experience, until they think they're above it all.
Well said. And his unraveling wasn't sudden. It was slow, agonizing. And looking back, it's filled with these alarms that just went unanswered.
And those alarms definitely got louder as the marriage itself started falling apart.
Absolutely. By May 2012, the marriage was really struggling, falling apart. Amber, after years of the control, the dysfunction, she'd had enough.
Yes, she left.
Briefly. They separated for about 2 weeks. But what Jones claimed happened during that short time became this twisted narrative for him, a justification he clung to.
What did he claim?
He came back home, and according to his divorce lawyer later, he found Amber involved with a neighbor, a 19-year-old neighbor.
Oh, wow.
For Jones, with his history, his obsession with control, his terror of abandonment, this wasn't just infidelity. It was humiliation, abandonment. It ripped open all those old childhood wounds.
A devastating blow for someone like him.
Critically so. He started seeing a therapist, Dr. April MHS. But the sessions seemed to reveal more about him.
What did the therapist say?
She testified later that he was consumed by this fear of being abandoned. A man just desperately clinging to control, driven by that childhood trauma. And now his wife, his family, his control, it was all slipping away.
And he blamed Amber.
Completely. Accused her of neglect, not caring for the kids properly.
Yep.
These claims, even though they seem mostly unsubstantiated, they triggered a DSS investigation back in 2011.
DSS, Department of Social Services.
Yeah. They went out, found the home messy, chaotic,
Yeah.
but not, in their view, dangerous enough to step in. Case closed. An early missed signal.
Another missed signal.
And the gap between them just grew.
Yeah.
The marriage was basically over. Eventually, Timothy took the kids, left Amber, and moved them all to Mississippi to live with his parents.
Back to his own unstable childhood environment, in a way.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And during this time, their last child, Abigail, was born. But things were so bad, so full of paranoia, he actually demanded a paternity test.
Seriously.
Seriously. It came back positive. He was the father. Just another brutal blow to that relationship.
So the divorce goes through?
October 2013, it's finalized.
Mm-hmm.
And then, this is the part that's still so baffling, Timothy Jones gets full sole custody, all 5 kids.
How did that happen?
It remains a really troubling question. Amber only got supervised visits. And guess who had to supervise them?
Let me guess.
Him. Jones himself, giving a controlling, unstable parent total power over the kids' contact with their mother. It's deeply concerning how that arrangement was ever approved.
Absolutely chilling. So he moves back to South Carolina.
Back to Lexington County, but into another mobile home, remote dirt road again, Red Bank area. Really isolated. It wasn't just a home. It felt like a prison he designed himself. Total control, no oversight.
And Amber's visits.
Rare. Difficult. Not at the trailer, but at a Chick-fil-A. Can you imagine trying to connect with your kids in a fast food restaurant? It's heartbreaking.
Phone calls were supervised, meetings limited. He kept up this facade, though, the responsible single dad. Kids went to Salvation Army youth nights on Sundays. Normalcy on the surface.
But this is where the systemic failures just become devastatingly clear, isn't it? Because behind those closed doors, things were getting much, much worse.
How so?
He was investigated for child abuse. Not once, but twice, in that final year before the murders.
2 investigations. 2 chances.
2 critical chances for someone to intervene. First one, May 2014. A child reported spanking, being forced to do these punishing exercises.
And?
Dismissed. Harsh, but within the law? Why? No visible bruises.
So if you don't leave a mark, it's okay.
That seems to have been the interpretation. Another red flag missed because the definition of danger was too narrow.
Unbelievable. And the second investigation.
Just 2 weeks later. This one was even more chilling. Allegations of routine beatings. Bruises were mentioned this time, not feeding them properly.
Oh, this sounds serious.
And critically, that he deliberately kept them out of public school. The allegation was specific, so no one would see the bruises and ask questions.
Oh my God, that's premeditated concealment of abuse.
Exactly. And there's this haunting line in the case notes from that second complaint. Dad appears to be overwhelmed as he is unable to maintain the home.
They saw he was overwhelmed. So what happened with that case?
That's the tragedy. It wasn't closed, but it wasn't resolved either. It just lingered, sat in limbo. The investigators never finished the report.
They didn't finish it.
Never got the chance. Because within weeks, before anything could be concluded, before anyone could act, those 5 children were dead.
It just makes you sick. What happens when the systems meant to protect kids fail that badly? When the definitions of abuse just don't match the reality of escalating danger?
It's a total systemic failure, isn't it? Every level. The signs were there, documented. The cries for help were made, kids whispering, Amber shouting, and still, nobody stepped in decisively.
While he's becoming more unhinged, obsessed with control, haunted by betrayal, crumbling under the pressure.
And the kids become the ultimate victims of a storm he couldn't, or maybe wouldn't, control.
And that storm finally broke, August 28th, 2014. Inside that mobile home, he did the unthinkable, killed all 5 of them.
His account, pieced together later, he claimed it started with Nathan damaging an electrical outlet.
Just an outlet.
That's what he said sent him into a rage. He forced Nathan to do those exercises again. P2, he called it. His perverse punishment system.
Just brutal physical exertion.
Until the boy collapsed. Jones's words were horrifying. Emptied his ass until he couldn't handle it anymore. He claimed Dayton died in bed later.
But the forensics.
Forensics strongly suggested strangulation, not exhaustion, a far more violent end.
And after Nathan, he didn't stop.
No, that's what's so profoundly disturbing. It wasn't one act of rage. It was methodical. He turned to the others, strangled them, one by one.
Oh, God.
He admitted it later. Said his oldest, Mia, just 8 years old, she saw him kill one of her brothers.
She witnessed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he strangled her too.
Because she saw.
Because she saw. He even admitted using a belt on the younger ones. Said their necks were too small for his hands.
That detail, using a belt, it's just pure horror.
Pure horror. And then, immediately after, he starts the cover-up, wrapping them in black trash bags, using bleach to try and hide the smell.
And because he was their legal guardian, no Amber Alert.
Exactly. A loophole with the most tragic consequences imaginable. Their disappearance wasn't news until it was far too late. He kept the bodies with him, in the car, for days.
Driving around with them.
Driving around. DNA expert Stephanie Stanley later had the grim task of confirming their identities from samples in the car and the home.
And the prosecutors later, they focused on aggravating circumstances, right? To seek the death penalty.
They did. 2 key ones. First, that 2 or more persons were murdered by one act or pursuant to one scheme or course of conduct. Clearly applicable here.
The methodical nature.
Precisely. And the second, even more straightforward, the murder of a child 11 years of age or under. All 5 were under 11. The oldest was 8.
These points were crucial, weren't they, to counter any claim of just a sudden snap?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They highlighted the cruelty, the methodical approach, even if parts felt chaotic. It wasn't just one impulsive moment.
So the grim aftermath unfolds. September 1st, he's at Dunkin' Donuts. September 3rd, he's buying saws, bins, acid at Walmart.
The premeditation, or at least the calculated cover-up, becomes clearer and clearer.
And he's finally stopped when?
September 6th. A routine traffic checkpoint in Mississippi. He's driving a Cadillac Escalade by then.
And the officers notice something's wrong.
Definitely. He looked off, odd, erratic, possibly violent. They initially thought maybe drugs or alcohol.
But then they ran his plates.
Exactly. South Carolina plates. And the alerts lit up. 5 missing children.
And inside the car.
The evidence was undeniable. Blood, bleach, maggots, materials for making meth, and those handwritten notes.
The notes on how to mutilate a body.
Step-by-step instructions in his own handwriting. Plus, he was high on synthetic marijuana.
Which might explain some paranoia, but not the notes, not the planning.
Exactly. It doesn't excuse the intent.
Sure.
So, cornered, he eventually leads them to the dump site.
Where had he left them?
Alabama. Turns out that wasn't the original plan. He'd intended to go all the way to Mexico, dispose of them there, make them disappear forever.
But he couldn't.
The smell of decomposition got too strong, even for him. The heat, the bodies. So he pulled over off a rural dirt road near Camden, Alabama, and just left them.
Just left them there.
5 small bodies in black trash bags.
Under sun.
For nearly a week.
The decomposition must have been.
Dr. Janice Ross, the pathologist, called it advanced decay. The bags acted like ovens, she said, trapping heat, moisture, speeding everything up, maggots, animals. It was horrific.
And the autopsies themselves, they must have been incredibly difficult.
Unimaginable. Elias first, still in his school shirt, wrapped in 2 bags, fractured neck bone, confirmed strangulation.
Yeah.
Unclothed, Devastating tissue loss due to decay. Her left hand was missing.
Missing? Oh God. Gabriel.
2 parallel marks on his neck, consistent with a belt or strap. Confirmed strangulation, not by hand. Matching Jones's admission.
And Abigail, the youngest.
Empty stomach. Least decomposed, which raises that awful possibility that she might have been starving, or the last one alive.
Just chilling possibilities, sniff that.
His body also showed clear signs of violence, consistent with a struggle perhaps. The overall cause for all 5. Asphyxiation by manual strangulation, homicides.
And that empty stomach detail for Abigail? It just adds another layer of potential cruelty, doesn't it? Neglect before the murder.
It certainly suggests a period of distress, maybe deprivation, before the end. We can't know for sure, but it's deeply disturbing. And again, you connect this to the cover-up attempts, the bleach, the acid, the notes. It just doesn't fit the sudden rage narrative he tried to push. It points to calculation, awareness.
So he's caught, extradited back to South Carolina. Initially, he says nothing.
Just silence. But eventually, fragments start coming out. Anxiety, paranoia, betrayal, and that bizarre, chilling claim.
That the kids were going to kill him, chop him up, and feed him to the dogs.
That was his reason, his delusion. He was put on suicide watch immediately.
And then the confession tape played in court. His own voice.
Yeah, parts of it eerily calm. Acknowledging he confessed, that it would be used against him, and mentioning that promise of a good burial for the kids.
Almost transactional.
It felt that way. Then he admits it all, killing them in the trailer. The story about Nathan and the outlet, making him do exercises, finding him dead.
He described it as a snap.
My mind flipped, he said. Claimed he took the coward route instead of calling police. Blamed voices, a demonic gremlin.
But then described the strangulations.
Methodically, one by one. Admitted putting them in the trunk, thinking about cutting them up or burning them, even writing it down, but then saying he couldn't go through with it.
He cried in court, didn't he? Claimed it wasn't planned.
He did. Tried to sell it as a what just happened moment, but the evidence just screamed otherwise. The notes, the bleach, the blood, the meth stuff, the disposal materials, those receipts for bins and saws after the killings.
And the prison guard's testimony, that was devastating.
Absolute brutal. One guard recalling Jones saying he choked her till she turned purple, talking about Mia because she saw what he did.
Couldn't let her live as a witness.
And another guard quoting him saying Nathan was just messing with a light socket when he grabbed and strangled him. Then killed his daughter. Then the others. Just cold recounting.
What about the psychiatric evaluation? Did they buy the snap or Voice's defense?
No. The court psychiatrist diagnosed him not with schizophrenia like the defense wanted, but with a drug-induced psychotic disorder.
A crucial distinction. Drug use distorted his perception, but didn't necessarily mean he wasn't responsible.
Exactly. And his other statements, talking about seeing normal everyday people but not talking to them, the voices being so loud, logic is so quiet.
Yeah.
His weird claim, I'm a Freemason, his old school views on discipline, kids getting their ass busted by a teacher.
And that chillingly ironic comment about teaching his kids respect for human life.
I will not let my kids go out and go blasting people away because I'm not teaching them respect human life.
Yeah.
Right before describing how he took theirs. It's profoundly disturbing.
And the context of that night. The synthetic marijuana, yes, but also watching violent movies like American History X, then listening to butterfly kisses.
That juxtaposition showed he wasn't totally detached, right? He understood context, knew right from wrong. It wasn't a complete break from reality.
Even his own grandmother saw through it.
Cindy Jones. Her testimony was powerful. Tim Jones is a selfish man. He grew up knowing that he can manipulate his family.
Selfishness, manipulation, control. Coming back again and again.
It really raises that question. How do you reconcile claims of psychosis with such clear evidence of calculation, planning, and this consistent, disturbing worldview?
The evidence of planning just seems overwhelming.
It does. The notes, the purchases, they point away from pure impulse. His past trauma, control issues, rigid beliefs, they all seem to funnel into this final horrific act. It becomes this chilling study of how losing control, or perceiving you're losing control, can lead to extreme violence in certain individuals.
In the end, as his grandmother said, it came down to choice. She made a conscious decision.
It seems inescapable. Despite everything in his past, he made the choice to kill his children.
So, the trial. 15 days of just gut-wrenching testimony, disturbing details.
Must have been incredibly difficult for everyone in that courtroom.
On June 4th, 2019, the verdict comes back. Guilty on all 5 counts of murder.
And they confirmed the aggravating circumstances.
Yes, both of them. The two or more persons murdered in one scheme, and the murder of children under 11, setting the stage for the penalty phase.
Where they decide between life and death.
Exactly. Just over a week later, June 13th, the jury returns. They agreed the crime was especially cruel, heinous, beyond forgiveness.
And the sentence.
Death. Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to death.
One of only 2 people sentenced to death in South Carolina that year.
Yeah. And he's still on death row now, awaiting execution.
It's interesting, isn't it, how the legal system, despite all the earlier systemic failures that let this happen, ultimately delivered the most severe verdict possible. An acknowledgement of the cruelty, the premeditation.
A form of accountability, yes, but it doesn't undo anything.
No, he's now another name on that dark list. A father who became his children's executioner, waiting for the end. And it leaves us with that haunting question from the source material, doesn't it? Who comes to help the children whose own protectors are their biggest enemies?
It's a question that stays with you long after you hear the details. So we've gone through this tragic, heartbreaking case, Timothy Jones Jr.'s story, from his own damaged past to the horrific crime, the aftermath, the systemic failures.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. And you, listening, you've come on this deep dive with us, looking closely at the sources, pulling out these incredibly difficult truths.
So what does it all mean for you?
I think it means seeing that complex interplay, right? Personal history, societal systems, individual choices, and how terribly wrong it can all go.
And maybe it raises an important question for all of us, something that goes beyond just this one awful case.
What's that?
Beyond the horror, this case really spotlights those crucial, often hidden signs of danger escalating in private spaces, behind closed doors. What's our collective responsibility? As communities, as neighbors, just as individuals, to recognize and, maybe more importantly, to act on those quieter alarms, the ones that come before the catastrophe.
That's a powerful thought to end on, the need to listen to the whispers before they become screams.
Exactly. It urges us to keep thinking critically about child protection, about mental health, about control, and just the really complex, sometimes terrifying nature of human behavior.